Hi everyone, it is me, Sammy, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. Hi, how are you? I hope you're having a lovely day. Now, my channel is going through some crazy changes at the moment. Not changes, just additions. I'm adding so many new topics and categories to my channel, but don't worry guys, all of the old stuff is still going to be coming onto my channel. I'm just going to start categorizing it into playlists for you guys. So say if you want to watch the food challenges or the beauty or the reaction videos that are now coming in, and also in the future music, me and Ron are going to start doing covers very soon on my channel as well. So all them different playlists are going to be lists in my playlist, so go and check them out if you like a particular category on my channel. Now, if you do enjoy today's video guys, please don't forget to smash that thumbs up button, drop a comment down below. I love replying to you guys in the comment section, and also subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more from me, because I upload every single week. And without further ado, let's get into the video. I am back at it again today guys with another reaction video. Now, my first ever reaction video went down a treat. You guys absolutely loved it. It was a reaction to the movie trailer of Manakanika. Now, I will link that up in the cards above if you guys have not checked that out already. Go and check it out. Such an awesome movie with a lot of historical context. Now, because of that, I did some research before, and you guys really appreciated the research that I went into, and you guys also said if you want to know a bit more about it, then check out this speech. Now, this speech is by Dr. Shashi Tharoor at the Oxford Union, and the speech is called Britain Does Owe Reparations. I was very hesitant to do this video just because it is a very, very heavy subject. It's very political. I wasn't necessarily going to get into this topic, but I feel like I should. I feel like I should voice my opinion on it, and I feel like I should share this with others. That's my main intention, is to share it. Because I have a feeling a lot of British citizens are not going to know a lot about this at all. So yeah, I just want to share it, spread awareness of it. That's my intention behind this video. And I had so many requests from you guys that I just could not ignore it. I'm not even kidding. There was like 40 to 50 requests for a reaction to this. So here it is for you guys. I've got my laptop on my lap, and let's just dive into this video and we'll get my reaction afterwards.
President and gentlemen, ladies of the House, standing here with 8 minutes in my hands and at this venerable and rather magnificent institution, I was going to assure you that I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking, that as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shall not keep you long. But now finding myself the 7th speaker out of 8 in what must already seem a rather long evening to you, I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently. Perhaps what I should do is really try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced by the opposition today. We had, for example, Sir Richard Ottery suggesting, they're challenging the very idea that it could be argued that the economic situation of the colonies was actually worsened by the experience of British colonialism. Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard. India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain. Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India. In fact, Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India. The handloom weavers, for example, famed across the world, whose products were exported around the world, Britain came right in. There were actually these weavers making fine muslin, light as woven air, it was said. And Britain came right in, smashed their thumbs, broke their looms, imposed tariffs and duties on their cloth and products, and started, of course, taking the raw materials from India and shipping back manufactured cloth, flooding the world's markets with what became the products of the dark and satanic mills of Victorian England. That meant that the weavers in India became beggars, and India went from being a world-famous exporter of finished cloth into an importer, went from having 27% of world trade to less than 2%. Meanwhile, colonialists like Robert Clive bought their rotten boroughs in England on the proceeds of their loot in India, while taking the Hindi word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits. And the British had the gall to call him Clive of India, as if he belonged to the country, when all he really did was to ensure that much of the country belonged to him. By the end of the 19th century, the fact is that India was already Britain's biggest cash cow, the world's biggest purchaser of British goods and exports, and the source of highly paid employment for British civil servants. We literally paid for our own oppression. And as has been pointed out, the wealthy Victorian British families that made their money out of the slave economy, 1/5 of the elites of the wealthy class in Britain in the 19th century owed their money to transporting 3 million Africans across the waters. And in fact, in 1833, when slavery was abolished, what happened was that a compensation of £20 million was paid, not as reparations to those who had lost their lives or who had suffered or been oppressed by slavery, but to those who had lost their property. I was struck by the fact that your Wi-Fi password of this union commemorates the name of Mr. Gladstone, the great liberal hero. Well, I'm sorry, his family was one of those who benefited from this compensation. Staying with India, between 15 and 29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famines. The most famous example, of course, was the Great Bengal Famine during the Second World War, when 4 million people died because Winston Churchill, deliberately as a matter of written minuted policy, proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. He said that the starvation of anyway underfed Bengalis mattered much less than that of sturdy Greeks. This is Churchill's actual quote. And when conscience-stricken British officials wrote to him, pointing out that people were dying because of this decision, he peevishly wrote in the margins of the file, "Why hasn't Gandhi died yet?" So all notions that the British were trying to do their colonial enterprise out of enlightened despotism to try and bring the benefits of colonialism and civilization to the benighted heathen. I'm sorry, Churchill's conduct in 43 simply one example of many that gave a lie to this myth. As others have said on the proposition, violence and racism were the reality of the colonial experience, and no wonder that the sun never set on the British Empire, because even God couldn't trust the English in the dark. Let me take World War I as a very concrete example, since the first speaker, Mr. Lee, suggested these things couldn't be quantified. Well, let me quantify World War I for you. Again, I'm sorry, from an Indian perspective, others have spoken of other countries. 1/6 of all the British forces that fought in the war were Indian. 54,000 Indians actually lost their lives in that war. 65,000 were wounded. Another 4,000 remained missing or in prison. Indian taxpayers had to cough up £100 million in that time's money. India supplied 70 million rounds of ammunition, 600,000 rifles and machine guns, 42 million garments were stitched and sent out of India, and 1.3 million Indian personnel served in this war. I know all this because, of course, the commemoration of the centenary has just taken place. But not just that, India had to supply 173,000 animals, 370 million tons of supplies, and in the end, the total value of everything that was taken out of India, India, by the way, suffering from recession at that time and poverty and hunger, was, in today's money, £8 billion. You want quantification? It's available. Second World War, It was even worse, 2.5 million Indians in uniform. I won't belabor the point, but of Britain's total war debt of £3 billion in 1945 money, 1.25 billion was owed to India and never actually paid. Somebody mentioned Scotland. Well, the fact is that colonialism actually cemented your union with Scotland. You know, the Scots had actually tried to send colonies out before 1707. They'd all failed, I'm sorry to say. But then, of course, came union, and India was available, and there you had a disproportionate employment of Scots. I'm sorry, Mr. Mackenzie has to speak after me. Engaged in this colonial enterprise as soldiers, as merchants, as agents, as employees, and the earnings from India is what brought prosperity to Scotland, even pulled Scotland out of poverty. Now that India is no longer there, no wonder the bonds are loosening. Now, we've heard other arguments on this side. There's been a mention of the railways. Well, let me tell you, first of all, as my colleague, the Jamaican High Commissioner, has pointed out, railways and roads were really built to serve British interests and not those of the local people. But I might add that many countries have built railways and roads without having had to be colonized in order to do so. They were designed to carry raw materials from the hinterland into the ports to be shipped to Britain. And the fact is that the Indian or Jamaican or other colonial public, their needs were incidental. Transportation, there was no attempt made to match supply to demand for mass transport, none whatsoever. Instead, in fact, the Indian railways were built with massive incentives offered by Britain to British investors, guaranteed out of Indian taxes paid by Indians, with the result that you actually had 1 mile of Indian railway costing twice what it cost to build the same mile in Canada or Australia, because there was so much money being paid in extravagant returns. Britain made all the profits, controlled the technology, supplied all the equipment, and absolutely all these benefits came as private enterprise, British private enterprise, at public risk, Indian public risk. That was the railways as an accomplishment. We're hearing about aid. I think it was again Sir Richard Ottaway mentioned British aid to India. Well, let me just point out that British aid to India is about 0.4% of India's GDP. The government of India actually spends more on fertilizer subsidies, which might be an appropriate metaphor for that argument. If I may point out as well, that as my fellow speakers from the proposition have pointed out, there have been incidents of racial violence, of loot, of massacres, of bloodshed, of transportation, in India's case even of one of our last Mughal emperor. Yes, maybe today's Britons are not responsible for some of these depredations, but the same speakers have pointed with pride to their foreign aid. You're not responsible for the people starving in Somalia, but you give them aid. Surely the principle of reparations for the wrongs that have been done cannot be denied. It's been pointed out, for example, the dehumanization of Africans in the Caribbean, the massive psychological damage that has been done, the undermining of social traditions, of property rights, of the authority structures of these societies, all in the interests of British colonialism. And the fact remains that many of today's problems in these countries, including the persistence, in some cases the creation of racial and ethnic and religious tensions, were the direct result of the colonial experience. So there is a moral debt that needs to be paid. Someone challenged reparations elsewhere. Well, I'm sorry, Germany doesn't just give reparations to Israel. It also gave reparations to Poland. Perhaps some of the speakers here are too young to remember the dramatic picture of Chancellor Willy Brandt on his knees in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1970. And there are other examples. There is Italy's reparations to Libya. There's Japan's to Korea. Even Britain has paid reparations to the New Zealand Maoris. So it's not as if this is something unprecedented or unheard of that's going to somehow open some sort of nasty Pandora's box. No wonder Professor Lewis reminded us that he's from Texas. There's a wonderful expression in Texas that summarizes the arguments of the opposition: all hat and no cattle. Now, If I can just quickly look through the notes I was scribbling while they were speaking, there was reference to democracy and rule of law. Let me say with the greatest possible respect, it's a bit rich to oppress, enslave, kill, torture, maim people for 200 years and then celebrate the fact that they're democratic at the end of it. We were denied democracy, sir. We had to snatch it, seize it from you. With the greatest reluctance, it was conceded in India's case after 150 years of British rule, and that too with limited franchise. Yes, indeed, ma'am.
The opposition spoke quite highly of Greek and Athenian democracy on which the West should pride itself, and spoke of liberty and equality in that same name. The Athenian democracy was only functioning because of the slave society on which it was built. That's the nature of colonisation.
All right, I don't think that needs contradiction, not from me at any rate. but if I may just point out, I think the argument made by a couple of the speakers, the first speaker, Mr. Lee in particular, conceded all the evil atrocities of colonialism, but essentially suggested that reparations won't really help. They won't help the right people. They'll be used as a propaganda tool. They'll embolden people like Mr. Mugabe. It's always nice how in the old days, I'm sorry to say that the people of the Caribbean used to frighten their children into behaving and sleeping by saying Sir Francis Drake would come after them. That was a legacy of that. Now it's Mugabe will be there. So this is the new sort of Sir Francis Drake of our times. The fact is very simply, sir, that we are not talking about reparations as a tool to empower anybody. They're a tool for you to atone for the wrongs that have been done. And I am quite prepared to accept the proposition that you can't put a monetary sum on the kinds of horrors people have suffered. Certainly no amount of money can expiate the loss of a loved one, as somebody pointed out there. You're not going to be able to figure out an exact amount, but the principle is what matters. The fact is that to speak blithely of sacrifices on both sides, as an analogy was used here, a burglar comes into your house, ransacks the place, stubs his toe, and you say, well, there was a sacrifice on both sides. That, I'm sorry to say, is not an acceptable argument. The truth is that we are not arguing specifically that vast sums of money need to be paid. The proposition before this House is the principle of owing reparations, not the fine points of how much is owed, to whom it should be paid. The question is there a debt? Does Britain owe reparations? As far as I'm concerned, the ability to acknowledge a wrong that has been done, to simply say sorry, will go a far, far, far longer way than some percentage of GDP in the form of aid. What is required, it seems to me, is accepting the principle that reparations are owed. Personally, I'd be quite happy if it was £1 a year for the next 200 years after the last 200 years of Britain and India. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Dr. Shashi Tharoor is a formidable debater, isn't he? He's such an exceptional speaker, he really is. He gave so many figures and so many facts. My mind literally couldn't contain that much information in such a short period of time. But the figures were hard to swallow, really. It's quite hard to stomach the amount of pain and torture that India suffered. I didn't realise the high figures in which Indian soldiers were used for our war in World War I, World War II. They fought for our side. I didn't realise the figures of that. I knew there were some, but I didn't realise how many. We definitely owe reparations. And as Dr. Tharoor said, I'm not sure that you can measure someone's suffering. You can't really measure or put a monetary value on the suffering. Nothing will ever make what Britain did right again. Nothing will ever do that. I mean, you forgive and you move past the past, but when things aren't acknowledged, that makes it harder. Britain hasn't even said a formal apology. Like, we haven't said sorry, and I think that makes it so much harder for it to be forgiven. They can't forgive us if we don't apologise. That's how I see it anyway. And he skipped over the word massacre quite quickly, which I feel needed more elaboration. As someone that went to a British school, like I am British, please don't hate me for being British. Please don't hate me for being British. But I went to a British school. I was taught what Britain wants me to know about history. I was taught from a very small-minded perspective. So I'm not aware of any of this. And I feel like to fully explore it, to fully understand it, more British citizens need to be aware of it. And especially I go back to the word massacre. In particular, I've got it up on my phone because I didn't want to say the name wrong again. Really sorry if I don't pronounce this right. I'm not very good at it. But Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I've been doing a bit of research about the different atrocities that happened in India, and this was one that kept coming up and kept coming up. And it was a massacre that happened in Punjab, and there's like a walled meeting area. I think there was something like 5 small exits, but the British came in. There's said to be thousands, like a couple or 2,000 or 3,000 I think were gathered there, but figures aren't accurate. There's different websites saying different figures, so I'm not 100% sure how many were actually there, but 2,000 to 3,000 Indian citizens were there celebrating a Sikh festival, I believe, the Spring Harvest Festival, I think it was. But there was like a gathering there. British came in with rifles and shot until everyone was dead. When we're talking everyone, I mean men, women, children, babies. I think that just shows one of the examples of how barbaric the British were in India. And again, not taught this in school. I've had to do all of my own research. Dr. Tharoor skipped over the word massacre quite briefly in his speech, and I feel like that should have been elaborated on more. How many innocent lives were taken by the British? Britain owes reparations for those lives, but no monetary value is ever gonna repair them kinds of wrongs, atrocities committed by the British. Nothing is ever gonna fix that. And I've heard some Britishers say, like, this is in the past, we don't owe them anything. I've actually heard British people say that, and it's like, it's all well and good you saying that it's in the past, but when the Queen still wears the Kohinoor, sorry again if I can't pronounce it right, but the Kohinoor diamond, that's property of India. Like, it belongs to India. When she still wears that on her crown to this day. Britain and India have a good relationship now, I'd like to say, or like I feel like I do whenever I go to India. I'm always so welcomed there, and yeah, like there's no hard feelings against British citizens, I don't think. I think it's India have a hard time coping with the fact that we still have that diamond and various other historical artifacts that were taken from India that are in our museums, and they want to know from their history, like they want them in their museums. Like, it's understandable that they're still angry about that and they still have that against us. Like, the Queen literally has a stolen diamond from India in her crown, and I don't think many British people are aware of that, or everyone that I've told or tried to spread this to already didn't even know that. No one that I've told about the massacres to knows about the innocent lives taken, and let alone the lives that were like used in our war, like as soldiers and stuff like that. It's crazy. And the amount of money looted, taken, I don't think it would be possible for us to pay back all the money that we owe anyway. But again, like he said, it's not about the monetary value, it's just the acceptance. Like, yes, like by all means, I'm not saying don't give any money back, but they don't want aid from us. Like, they don't need it. Like, they are such a strong and powerful country. Like, they don't need charity from us. What they want is acknowledgement that what we done was wrong. If I was them, I would want like property back, like the diamond, like historical artifacts. Like, I would want that kind of thing returned to where it rightfully belongs. And the acknowledgement, more than anything, is something. Like, acknowledge that what you've done is wrong. Take that remorse, like have some kind of remorse for your actions. Or like, it's not, see, that's the thing, it's not my actions, but like, I feel bad. I feel horrible for what's happened in the past, and I feel like if everyone just had that general feeling of like, yeah, what we done was horrible and we feel really bad for it, and if it was taught in schools, like everyone else is taught this, like every child in India is taught this history about what the British did, and almost every single British citizen doesn't know what they've done, like does not know what their ancestors have done. It honestly makes me feel very, very uncomfortable when I feel it, when I think about them kind of things that the Britishers did. There needs to be more awareness. There needs to be acknowledgement for what we've done. And I don't know whether it's even a question of whether you will get reparations or not. It's the fact that, do we owe it? And 100% we owe reparations, in whatever form that may be. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought about my reaction. Please try and limit the hate comments. I got a fair few on my Manikarnika video, and that was a reaction to a movie trailer, so I'm quite worried as to how deep these comments are going to get and the reaction that I'm going to get from this video. I hope you liked the points that I put across. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and as always, I'll be replying to as many comments as I can. I do try to reply to every single one, but so apologies if I don't get to your comment, but I do try to reply to every single comment that I get on my videos. And thank you so much for watching if you've made it this far. I really, really appreciate it. And yes, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Take care for now. Bye!